Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Shots Fired podcast. I'm Mark Rutledge, and this is Kyle Schoberg.
And we brought the podcast all the way to Scottsdale, Arizona, where we're sitting down with the CEO of Axon, Rick Smith, to talk about the Moonshot goal that they've implemented at aiming to reduce gun-related deaths by police and the public by 50% in 10 years. Rick, welcome to the show. That's a bold statement. Can you tell everybody what the Moonshot goal is and how you plan to achieve it?
Yeah, so let me start with the reason for it. So, we started this in a garage in Tucson more than 30 years ago. We'll leave it at that. And since then, we've grown a lot. We're at almost 4,000 people now. And the thing that happens is organizations get bigger, is they get slower. They're more risk averse. We're publicly traded. So we have shareholders and a board of directors. And a few years ago, I was getting frustrated that we weren't taking enough risks. And so I sat with our TASER team and I said, guys, if we want to make the bullet obsolete, which is our goal, and I want to be very clear, we're not saying we're going to take anybody's guns away. We just want to give them something better. Right. We're going to bring Captain Kirk's stun weapons to life. We've got to take some more risks. This can't be like the TASER 7 is just a little bit better than the one before. And so I used this Moonshot as a sort of thought experiment internally. It started with, how would we outperform a 9mm? What would we do to get there in 10 years? And that's what led to TASER 10. Now, in order to do it, we had to kill one of our sacred cows. So up until now, every TASER we've made is not a firearm. And we achieved that by putting these gas cylinders inside them. They're expensive, they're large, they limit the number of shots you could take. They introduce things that can fail. So one of the obvious answers was, well, if we're going to increase performance, we got to be more than 2 shots. Cops don't carry Derringers. They carry weapons with a lot of ammo. It's hard to hit things. And our number one cause of failures is just miss with one of the darts. So we did the analysis and we could get 10 darts in the same area as 2 cartridges historically for TASER 10. But we'd have to get rid of all the gas cylinders. So I said, fine, if we got to be a firearm, police buy firearms all the time. The thing about moonshots, the concept comes from, of course, the Apollo moon landing program. And it's become sort of a catch-all term for really risky aspirational tech projects that appear impossible, but you've got a pathway to get there. And so as we dug through the data, I've read personally over 500 officer-involved shootings, going through them, and then we have use of force experts looking at them. And we estimated, we could actually get to about 40% of those cases, if they had a very effective long-range multi-shot TASER, about 40% of those cases we think could have been resolved with a TASER if we were more reliable, longer range, et cetera. If we had drones and robots that you could send into high-risk barricades and other situations, we could get to 70%. And so we said, okay, let's set a goal at 50%. And then let's use that as a rallying cry. And it's totally changed the public conversation. So we announced the Moonshot before we announced TASER 10. And we've been able to anchor everybody from the African American Mayors Association to the Fraternal Order of Police around this idea. And we've also been very careful. We are not criticizing police saying it's inappropriate when you're using lethal force today. What we're criticizing is ourselves. The tech industry hasn't given you the right tools yet. So here we are in 2024, and the way we stop a gunman in the United States of America is we send in more people with guns and we have a gunfight. This is like the Wild West, the 1800s, from a tech perspective. And again, I'm not criticizing police. Thank God the men and women have the courage to do that. But we shouldn't have to send more people in to have a gunfight. We should be able to send in a drone or a robot, safely, quietly end it with no drama, no big shootout. Nobody's going to get on TV going down in a hail of bullets. It's going to be uninteresting, boring, won't make the plot of a movie, but it's going to be effective. And people, I believe, over the next 10 years, we're going to dramatically... Now, we're very focused right now. The first 10 years is cutting gun deaths in policing incidents, not in general society.
Excellent. Well, so, our whole focus too, like what Mark and I do, we travel around, we train, and we also try to get cops to understand that there are better ways to do things than we did 5 years ago or 10 years ago, right? And tactics are one of those things, the way that we're responding to critical incidents. And I do really love the fact that you guys are bringing the technology to the game. So you got tactics and then the technology. So right now you guys are solely focused on the law enforcement side, correct?
Well, not entirely. We do have a consumer business, but 90% of our business is, well, historically it's been like 90% police. That's starting to drop, not because police aren't growing, but we have a large business growing now in enterprise. So basically private guard services are using our body cameras and our tasers in some cases, military and federal agencies. So we're very focused. The core of everything we do is public safety, but then we're extending out from there. Like, hey, if you're Walmart and you need to deal with how do I get evidence of even small crimes like a shoplifter to police. So we're now extending the Axon network out into pretty much everybody who interfaces with police as well.
Okay. So my follow-up question to that was just going to be, how are you integrating the technology with Axon for the tactics? Earlier, before we were even recording, we were talking about the VR. You guys have rolled that out. We've been seeing that rolling all over social media, going to different departments all over the United States. So can you just talk a little bit about how you're implementing this, the VR program?
Yeah. So one thing we realized, one of the reasons police officers have such high confidence in their gun, they have a very intimate relationship with their lethal weapon. And part of that's because you train a lot, you practice a lot. And then with that intimacy comes confidence. With a taser, look, the cartridges are expensive. So historically, you might fire, 4 cartridges when you're initially trained, maybe 2 a year after that?
Yeah, maybe 2.
And now imagine if we did that with your firearm. Hey, go fire 2 shots at the range. Okay,
that
you're done.
Happen.
Yeah, go out on patrol. So for us, the realization was in VR, we can create taser scenarios and you can fire thousands of cartridges. It costs nothing. So that was the reason we leaned into VR. And look, I'll also be honest, a lot of times you got to work the bugs out. Our first VR 2 years ago, it sucked. It was buggy. You had to wear these goofy wrist bracelets. We were on a learning journey. And thank you to all of our law enforcement customers. If you were an early VR customer, thanks for your patience. But the bugs are now out of it, and it's blowing people's minds. Like, oh wow, you can shoot at moving targets that aren't in these like goofy safety suits. So right now we've got what we call our energy weapon range. It's skills and drills. You're firing at dummies, but it's to learn the basic skills of how to operate the weapon. We're giving you real-time feedback. And by the way, in VR, we can score you in ways that are impossible on a physical firing range. I can tell you exactly where every dart hit. I can tell you the time between each trigger pull. We can track when you hit in sensitive areas. We can give you feedback. Hey, don't shoot in the face, please.
Yeah.
Although we see that in a little more colorful way. At the end, we can give you a scorecard, where you can see the exact dynamics of every shot. I'm really passionate. One of the things we're going to be surfacing next in VR is what we call lag. So with T10, you got to shoot 2 darts and you got to create your own spread. That's a new skill. And what we're seeing is, because historically, I think people are used to, I fire at once, 1 trigger pull and I'm done. So we want to get the lag down, and lag is the time from the first dart to the second dart. Because that's when you're in the twilight zone. You have decided to use force, and 1 dart is absolutely ineffective. It cannot complete a circuit. So we want to minimize that dead space where the guy could pull the dart out or anything could happen. So in VR, we're soon going to be releasing an upgrade where it's going to give you your lag on every drill, and we're going to be coaching you. Hey man, let's go. Like, get the lag time down. Once you go, it's game time. Get a minimum of 2 darts on target and be assessing in real time. The number 1 cause of failure we've seen in the field is they don't fire enough darts. And we think that's a training scar. Partially from, we've had agencies who used to have X26. We had an incident where an officer fired 1 dart, vapor locked, then started trying to re-trigger thinking he was re-energizing, was plugging rounds into the ground with the T10, basically came back and said, this thing's a piece of crap. And then, we heard about that and we're digging in and going, oh my gosh, it's a training scar. We got to get people through VR. So
yeah, that's a training mental issue with the officers, not the piece of equipment.
Well, I don't mean to criticize that individual officer. Ultimately, it's our job to understand the whole solution that we've got to bring to the officer. So I still put that on us. We got to give you the tools to be able to train.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's really interesting that you bring all this up. And I want to go back to when you talked about, like, this is mocked basically the goal off of the moon landing, and that was measured off of the mileage. And this is, how do we measure that? Well, it's off the lives that are saved, which I think is pretty huge. And Kennedy rallied the country to stand behind that. And what really stands out to me is you're not saying this is Axon's goal. This is our goal, which like includes everyone. And it's idolizing because it like sucks in the entire country and all law enforcement to go, wait a minute, I think I can actually get behind this. And everything that you just described is like, how do you go against that? You can't really. So I ask you, like,
well, we still have some haters, but
but maybe they don't know everything, because I've just learned a ton right here. Like, it's going out and simulating as it's actually a gun now. And it's very interesting. So I think the next question I want to ask you is, you've said a lot of stuff that's leading up to this, but what is next for Axon? Like, what can we as law enforcement expect?
So my job, I have the greatest job on earth, by the way. Like, I get to work with cops. This is such a cool community. They make movies and TV shows about the work you do, right? This is like heroism. I'm like Q in a James Bond film, or Alfred to Batman. I get to make the cool toys. And so as part of that, we've also organized the business very differently. I only have one direct report. I'm not a manager. I don't spend my time going through budgets and HR issues and all that kind of stuff that is stressful and can suck you in. I spend my time visiting customers, going to tech conferences, and trying to connect the dots. Like, what new technology is coming that could be helpful to our customers? An example is the cloud, right? So we created body cameras largely to protect cops, because I was sitting next to two cops at a trial where they were being accused of some god-awful stuff. And of course, the family, it was a guy who died of a meth overdose. The cops showed up, and what they described to me, they said this was like a scene from The Exorcist. Like, I'd never been scared in my 26-year law enforcement career, this guy tells me, until that night. Like, that person would have knocked me down and eaten my face if he could. There's that level of animalistic rage. It was not, they didn't run into the guy in the high school graduation photograph the families, the plaintiff's attorneys were putting up. And it was in that moment, I was like, we got to record this stuff that you guys see. So we started creating body cameras. Now, initially, nobody wanted to wear body cameras. It was creepy and new and looked Big Brother. But what we also realized was, with the TASER, we have a little bit of software. Even the old M26, we'd ship out a disk with just basically a program you could download the logs. Half the agencies out there never would install the simple software. They'd send us a weapon. They're like, yeah, our IT department won't let us install it. Okay. We're going to do body cameras. That's like orders of magnitude harder. And so we're looking at the world around us like, hey, there's this thing called the cloud where you no longer ship people disks to install software. And we all use it. We do our banking in the cloud, and people already were back when we were doing this. So it's just connecting the dots. It's like, we need to get law enforcement tech operating at the same speed as the rest of society. And the way you do that is you connect to a cloud service provider, and then we can provide software updates. We can store all this data. When we started the evidence.com march, people would tell us it's illegal. We can't, this is evidence. We can't put it in some cloud thing. And that's where my job is to dig in and go, okay, the real concern you have is safety. So I'd go and I'd talk to a bunch of technical experts, and it turns out data safety can be done better in the cloud than most agencies on their own. Most agencies don't have one full-time IT person, much less a full-time chief information security officer.
Yeah, no.
So the fact you have guys with guns standing around your computers doesn't make them safe. It's the tech that goes into it. And we've since been proven right. Like, over the past decade, there have been dozens and dozens of agencies and cities that have had their local systems hacked, even ransomware installed where they lose data. Knock on wood, that hasn't happened in the cloud. Now, it's not to say the cloud is 100% safe. This is like terrorism. Nobody is. But the underlying fundamentals were there. And so we leaned in and we said, no, sorry, customer, you're wrong. I understand your feedback, but the safety issue, we can actually, the data says this, the cloud is better for that approach. Okay, so long-winded way of saying, where I'm at now, again, I go to these futurist conferences. And by the way, I brought in one of my idols, a guy named Ray Kurzweil, just launched his new book, The Singularity is Near.
Show it to the camera there.
If you want to get your mind blown, read this. It can be a little bit dense. But Ray is a futurist who, back in 1999, published the predecessor book to this called The Singularity is Near, where he predicted a lot of things that are happening today, like the rise of artificial intelligence. Back in 99, he predicted we would have human level AI in 2029. And everyone thought he was crazy. And it's arguably here, will probably be here beforehand.
Yeah.
Anyway, AI is the next big thing, artificial intelligence. And we actually saw this coming a few years ago. And so that was also behind our cloud strategy. We realized, hey, if we get all the body camera footage in a massive, like, when I say the cloud, what I mean is a data center that's worth at least $1 billion, massive computing storage. We do it through our partners at Microsoft. And by the way, when you put your data in the cloud, it gets replicated 3 times into 3 different data centers, each of which is more than $1 billion to build. These things are massive.
Wow.
Because all the data is sitting there, and now we're running the largest data store anywhere in public safety, and one of the largest in the world. Because we have, I think we're like 10 times actually last I heard it was like 30 times larger than YouTube or Netflix in terms of the amount of video that we've got. Wow. Now we don't get as many views. But, every officer's uploading 2 hours of video every day.
Wow.
Now the next thing is, okay, we've built the plumbing to put your body cameras, your in-car cameras, your drones. We just bought a company called Fusus so that we can hook in all your community cameras from banks and Walmarts and all those that they can share to the police when there's a critical incident. They can be private when there's not. It's up to them. Now we've got all that data. How do we unlock what's in there? And so we just launched our first major AI product called Draft One. And the idea is we actually showed a video back in 2017. Hey, wouldn't it be great if tech could write your report for you? And I took some heat on that. People were like, this is smoke and mirrors. And it was smoke and mirrors. We didn't know when the technology would arrive, but because basically Ray's whole theme is technology doubles in capability every year. And when it doubles every year, that means every 10 years, it gets 1,000 times more capable. So I just put together some slides this morning comparing when I was born in 1970, the fastest computer in the world was a Cray supercomputer, the CD760, I think it was. The microprocessor in the ring I'm wearing is about 10 times more powerful than that Cray supercomputer.
Yeah, it's wild.
It weighed several tons. It, took up an entire very large room. Anyway, with tech moving at this speed, it's my job to work with our people at the company to anticipate, okay, what can we pick from the future that's going to be ready in a few years and be ready for it when it arrives to bring it to our customers. So AI, and right now we write your report after the incident's over. Within the next few years, we'll be doing live things. You'll be able to scan a driver's license, get a real-time NCIC lookup. We'll be able to scan a vehicle, be able to get a real-time ALPR hit from your phone, your body camera, your fleet camera. We'll be able to start combing through that data to help you solve, criminal cases. We're going to start next up. We'll be helping fill out forms. Not just right now. We do the police narrative, which, by the way, Fort Collins, Colorado, told us it's reducing their time spent writing reports by 82%.
Wow,
that's pretty aggressive. Our goal is 50%.
What cop doesn't want to hear that?
Yeah. Can you do it 100%?
Yeah, we'd love to. Actually, I think we will. So I was just meeting with some of the people at ChatGPT or OpenAI. They are the market leader in AI. I mean, they've got some competitors, but they're our partner. And because they're 50% owned by Microsoft, they put it in the Gov Cloud where we need it because we can't take your data, police data, and push it out to the consumer cloud.
Yeah.
So we can keep everything in a CGIS compliant data store and be able to run OpenAI models on it. And what they told us right now is basically today's AIs are about the level of a high school student. In the next release, they wouldn't tell us when, but it sounds like it's going to be before the end of the year. AI is going to go from high school student to PhD graduate.
What? Oh my.
And so then the question is, what can you do when AI is that capable? And so I would personally tell you, I think within 5 years, AI will be able to write all of your documentation because cops didn't get in this business to sit at a keyboard and do data entry. And yet that's what you spend about half your day on average doing.
Oh yeah.
Our goal right now is to cut that half in half and it'll free up a quarter of your time. So for any agency, that's effectively like a 33% increase in your force right now because you're spending that quarter of your time's gone and you can spend now in the remaining 75%, you got another 25%. Actually, if I do the math, that's more like a 50% increase in manpower, right? Because if you had 4 hours, you were policing and 4 hours doing paperwork, that 4 hours now goes to 6 hours of actual police work.
This is fascinating. I mean, I asked what is next to come, but there's a lot of stuff and I can't imagine what you are already thinking and working on that's not going to be talked about. This is incredible.
Because I mean, my next question was going to be, how is AI going to be implemented in Axon? And you just answered that. But I think it's funny because I think one of the biggest hurdles I think will come 5 years is nothing. I mean, that's tomorrow, dang near. That's going to go like that. Getting old administrators who've been cops for a long time, police chiefs, sheriffs, to buy off on that kind of stuff because their minds, that stuff never existed, right? When they were working, patrol or whatever. And so I think the why behind that is pretty powerful. And then getting administrators to buy off on that, to implement those things into departments. I mean, it's only going to make the beat cop more available to be doing what they should be out doing.
Yeah. And part of what we do as well is everything we make could be misused, like a TASER, like body camera. You could you can imagine that could be invasive of people's privacy, et cetera. So we put a lot of thought into the safety controls. Now that starts from a perspective, we have 7 values we try to live by. And we break them down to 2 words always. One of them is win right. Like we want to do things in a way we're going to be proud of. Like we're a profitable company. We don't need to go do something icky. And by the way, we think when you do things the right way, it's more profitable long-term and it sustains the business. So even when you look at things like AI, that's why a few years ago we said, look, we're not going to do facial recognition. Like the technology wasn't ready. It's too controversial. If you get it wrong in 1 or 2 cases, it could blow up. But writing people's reports, all right. Nobody's going to get killed if we get it wrong. You always have the underlying body camera data, and we put in a bunch of safeguards where the officer has to go through, answer questions in it. So we know they've reviewed it. They've got to sign off that they're taking legal responsibility. So we started with the easier stuff and then we work our way up. But we always want to do it in a way. Again, we want to win right. We want to do things we're going to be proud of.
Yeah. It's technology, detective work via technology is the way I envision that.
Yep, that was, and by the way, I just had an AI retreat with 7 or 8 major police chiefs and sheriffs. We kept the group pretty small to brainstorm, right? Because I don't even know what the next thing is, but I've never been a cop. But I try to turn that into a superpower by embracing my ignorance. I don't know what you guys need, but if I get the right people together, you'll tell us what you need.
Yeah.
And then I had a futurist and our AI expert, in the room, and that's where the magic happens. And one of the things that came out of that was investigative use of AI. So that just last week that popped onto the board is okay. We're putting it into the roadmap.
Yeah. Hey. Wow. On the heels of that, we actually brought in a Scottsdale sergeant, Serbalik, and he's going to come in and explain the usage of the TASER 10 that you guys have now deployed out on a critical incident that they have recently had, which ultimately saved a woman's life. So we'll bring him on the show. We want him to share the story, and we'll talk about that. All right, so we've got Sergeant Serbalik with the Scottsdale Police Department here with us on the podcast, and he's going to share a story where you guys were involved in a critical incident. You were able to successfully deploy the new TASER 10 and save this woman's life. Can you walk us through that situation?
Sure. I'm going to take you back to September of 2023. We had approximately 10 of the TASER 10 devices out on our patrol force on a trial basis. This is when we were moving from the previous legacy TASER device to the new TASER 10. Fortunately for us, one of the officers that responded in this critical incident this day was one of our TASER 10 operators. So this incident started with a call of an emotionally disturbed person. This is a female in her residence, and she had been brandishing a knife. She had been experiencing mental health crisis. So what we did is we deployed our crisis response team, our crisis negotiators, along with numerous patrol assets. We actually had some decentralized SWAT respond to this incident as well. So we were able to contain the incident to one residential house, one lot. We had the property contained, and we had a negotiator out front manning a PA on a vehicle. We're trying to solve this using time and distance and try to get to a safe resolution. We knew this person was in crisis, and we wanted to get her the help she needed. Unfortunately for her, she was carrying a large, one of those color-coded Costco kitchen knives. So she had the purple butcher knife up to her neck, and she wouldn't put it down. She was in and out of the house. There were dogs running about. It was fairly chaotic, but we had negotiators on scene. So we're negotiating with this subject, trying to come to a peaceful resolution. So this is where our TASER 10 operator comes in, and I was able to bring the download logs from this device. We could take a look at those. So from a distance of 24 feet, the officer stepped out from in front of one of our patrol vehicles where the negotiations were taking place from, and he deployed the TASER 10 successfully. He put 2 probes into the suspect, or this subject of the crisis she was in. And in doing so, she dropped the knife, fell to the ground. The officers were able to move in safely, move the knife out of the area, and safely take her into custody. And one of the things about this incident that led us to believe we really changed an outcome that day is afterwards, she told the officers, "Hey, why didn't you shoot me? I was planning to die." Wow. And in doing so, we look at that after the fact and we go, okay, technology allowed us to take what would have otherwise likely been an officer-involved shooting. We had other officers on scene that in their debrief said, "Hey, had she taken 2 more steps, I was going to shoot her." we had rifles coming off safe. So for those of us in the business, we understand we're getting to the point we've made a decision, we've drawn the line, and she's getting to that line. So thankfully, our TASER 10 operator had the confidence in the weapon system. He was able to safely bring that suspect away from that danger, and we were able to get her into custody safely. So getting that feedback afterwards of why didn't you shoot me, and I was trying to die, it's pretty cool to get to close that loop and see not only did we save her life, but now you go into the officer that deployed the TASER 10, the trainee he had on scene that day, all of the other people involved in that call, that woman's family, all of the lives that were altered in a very positive way through the use of technology. So very
I have
cool
a question on that. I want to ask you, Rick, hearing that story based on a device that you built and saving someone's life like that, I mean, how does that make you feel? Because I saw your reaction when that story got shared with you before we started recording, and I could see that like you were lit up about that. How does that make you feel?
If you're a father and your kid's ever done something extraordinary, that is the feeling. It's just phenomenal. It's just, it's an honor and a privilege to be part of the team. You know, we know the challenges and the negative energy sent towards police officers over the past few years has been just so depressing. And to see just the quality of men and women who go into this profession, put their lives at risk, put their careers at risk, you know, and take a lot of pain and guff from the community, where at least a few years ago it had been okay to, you know, do terrible things and speak badly to cops. I think the pendulum's swinging. Yeah. But you see an incident like this and it feels great. It's like, yeah, we played a role there. Our little baby went out in the world and in the hands of a trained professional, changed an outcome.
Can you pull out the TASER 10 and just show us, Rick, kind of walk us through the new development of the TASER 10, why it's different. It shoots 10 darts versus it's the standard, 2 or.
Yep. So at its core, the big tech innovation was that we have these individual cartridges that now they are firearm. I see you kept it unloaded, which is smart before handing it to me.
I brought a safe weapon.
We should have prefaced that, everybody. It's all unloaded.
This is made it safe.
Yeah.
Nice work.
So basically the 10-shot magazine.
Yeah.
And we were able to, this is a great example of when you're doing new things, it's very unpredictable, like, frankly, how to do it. So I'll give you an example. We were able to shrink down the propellant so that every dart could have an individual propellant. Then we were having all these debates. Well, what should we do? Historically, we've always fired 2 darts because you need a positive and a negative. Mm-hmm. All right, so we shoot 2 darts on the first trigger pull. But then what do we do on the next trigger pull? Do we shoot 2 more? Well, usually you only missed with 1 dart. We just shoot 1 more. But then is it going to be weird if it shoots 2 and then every time you pull the trigger, it's doing something different? The main inventor on our tasers was pushing the idea, let's just fire all 10, like shotgun blast, right? We'll get a connection. And then we said, well, why don't we do the simplest thing? Let's just shoot 1 at a time and have them all aim straight. Every officer we asked if we should do that said, no, that's a dumb idea because I need 2 darts. And we're all used to shooting 2 darts at an angle. We went ahead and we built the simplest thing and said, let's test that first. 100% of the officers, after they fired it, said, my God, that was so much easier to use. And I don't have to think about angles and distances. Where's my second dart? And like, they're doing trigonometry on the fly, under stress, trying to like aim 2 things at once. So it's just a great example. I didn't expect that either, but there's some things you just have to test and put it into people's hands and see what the human experience is of using it. So basically this took range, extended the range to 45 feet. And because it's individually targeting the darts, we can now work at 0 feet. So if I'm right next to you, I can go tap, tap, 1 in the shoulder, 1 in the leg. If you're at 45 feet, I go tap, tap with a little spread. So previously the effective range was, you had to be at least 5 feet away. If you're too close, well, you don't get enough spread. If you're more than 15 feet away, well, now you're not going to have the second dart. Here we give a clean 0 to 45 feet of capability. 10 shots, we calculate a 98% chance you can get 2 darts on target. We do have 1 remaining hurdle, and that is heavy clothing. And that's frankly where I'm spending a lot of my time in the R&D lab, is working on what we can do with TASER 10, not a new weapon you got to go buy. What can we do to get through clothing better? And our goal is to get the effectiveness rate up on this up to the 98, 99, 99.9. I don't want to say 100%, but as high as we can get it.
Interesting. So you guys are in Scottsdale. Obviously, the Axon headquarters is here in Scottsdale. How is the Scottsdale Police Department working with Axon? Obviously, you guys have implemented the TASER 10. You guys have a very successful usage rate with it. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So we're an interesting agency in that, like many agencies around the country, there's leads and lags in where you are with technology, where you are with your command staff that grew up in the era of writing paper tickets, and they didn't have technology at their disposal. We brought a chief in about around 3 years ago now who sees the advantage of technology in law enforcement. And in 3 years, we went from an agency that was kind of middle to the back of the pack to now tip of the spear. We're prioritizing technology. We're leaning in with numerous technology vendors. So specifically with TASER, we've gone from the legacy devices where Rick was talking about, you're doing trigonometry on the fly, under stress, 2 darts, a very middle of the road success rate. I'd say the previous devices for us were at about a 50% success rate. Now with the TASER 10, what we've experienced in our, I think, 17 deployments is we've had 2 what we would consider failures, 2 outcomes that were not what we were hoping. So that leaves 15 out of 17 that the device worked. And a lot of that came from confidence in the weapon system. Our operators with the TASER 10s, they have the opportunity to deploy more darts. One of the failures per se, is we had an inexperienced TASER 10 user that pulled the trigger twice, didn't see the change in behavior he was looking for, and it's that mental training scar that Rick touched on earlier. He thought, oh, okay, I pulled it twice, it didn't work, let me go to something else. So we captured it on body camera. He dropped the device and moved to a different technique, which, as you know, in use of force, you've got to consider the decision-making process. There's no one tool that's going to solve every problem. Mm-hmm. So he did the right thing, per se, in transitioning to a different option, but keeping in mind that there is no one tool to solve every problem. So we've gone from kind of middle to the back of the pack to tip of the spear.
Tell me about the other failure. We learn more from our failures. Yeah. So I got it, but that was the first one.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So I brought up the one that I'm okay talking about. The other is actually, it's kind of my bad. As the TASER program manager, it was a failure with the new device. You're seeing a lot of updates, a lot of the firmware updates. The technology is improving very quickly. And I made a phone call to one of my contacts, and he said, oh yeah, what firmware version do you have? And I felt this big. I was like, oh man, I screwed up. I didn't give the officer what he needed to be successful that day. So we did the firmware update, and the device operated exactly as it was supposed to.
You're being very gracious. That's still on us. Thank you for sharing that back with us so we could fix it. But this is the game for us now. We got to discover every time something goes wrong and get after and fix it. So thanks.
We just didn't know about that as a bug or as an issue. And as soon as I made the phone call, oh yeah, that's a firmware update. You haven't updated your firmware. It had kicked out 2 days prior, and with the new device, I just hadn't thought about, hey, we need to be docking these even more often than we otherwise would have.
Yeah. And docking, by the way, is just swapping the battery out. You don't dock the actual device.
Yeah.
Just get a new battery.
Well, I appreciate the fact that you asked that question here, and this was not prepped, and you 100% took accountability for that. Like, it was no problem. And I think that's what we need in law enforcement is continuous ability to take accountability for stuff, because you're right. It really wasn't that officer's. It was based on the training.
No, I want to take accountability for that one now. We shouldn't have bugs, but these things do happen, and we try to get them, fixed and updated as fast as we can.
So I got one last question. So sitting here listening and talking to you, this is absolutely fascinating. Just your mind, the way it's thinking, and all these great things that are coming from it. From an officer's perspective, and maybe this comes from you as well, how do we get our cops on the street as excited as you? Because I watched the two of you watch these videos of that was a successful deployment. I mean, I'm getting the chills because you were actually excited about it. And really we should be, because in your case, if that officer decided to use lethal force and not the TASER 10, the amount of lives that are affected by that, and that just goes to the goal of that was a win for everyone. We're all behind that. So how do you get cops at the street level that carry that to change their mindset to know, no, I want to use this? How do you do that?
So from a training perspective, it's, nobody's coming to work wanting to hurt people. We're not wanting to hurt suspects. And obviously we don't want to have our officers injured. We don't want innocents injured. So providing them with good training. and providing them with numerous force options. Like I said, there's no one tool that's going to solve every problem, but allowing that decision-making process and training force as a decision-making process. What tool is going to be most applicable in this circumstance? This device has a maximum effective range out to around that 40 feet. What if we have something longer? Do we have another technique we can layer that with and prepare that level of confidence for the officer to know that given most circumstances, they're going to be prepared to deal with the problem at hand?
All right. Shameless product plug, VR. And the reason I say that, and being a little self-deprecating there, one thing we've learned is police officers' confidence in their gun comes from repetitive training. They gain confidence on the range. With a TASER, historically, they fire a couple cartridges and that's it. And that's our fault, right? The cartridges are too expensive. We know that, but they're expensive because they're expensive to make. We make them all here in the U.S. So we're going to buy them in a low cost labor market. But with VR, you can now fire unlimited cartridges, and we can make it really fun. We just launched the TASER Arena, where there's a leaderboard. You can compete with their other officers. We've got TASER versus zombies, TASER versus crash test dummies. In the arena, we don't use any realistic looking human people because we don't want to be accused of like making cops trigger happy. But look, you got to fire a lot of rounds to get comfortable. And in the games, we can give you visual feedback, things we can't even do in the real world. Like if you hit somebody in the head, bam, lights up red, bad move, don't shoot him in the head. You lost some points. And so in those games, you're getting points for fast connections with a low lag speed time to get 2 darts on target with a good spread without putting it in the face, groin, neck, or the chest area.
Well, I think I appreciate you answering that because that is important. It needs to be practiced a lot. When I was in law enforcement, I carried a TASER from day one. And honestly, the only time I ever used it is I actually threw it at a person because I didn't turn it on and I didn't train with it. So that was the only time I ever used it. But the excitement that you guys have with this TASER and the training and how much training there could be involved in it, everyone that responds to a call is like, I got the shield. I want the distraction device. I'll take this weapon, or I got this. Like everyone is excited about something. I hope that cops these days are now going to get excited about this so they can be behind the goal, because this is awesome to sit here and have this opportunity. So I appreciate your guys' time. I'm very thankful for being here. So thank you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Were you going to share something real quick?
Yeah, so real quick, Rick, on the lag time, I highlighted the 2 lines here on this deployment, and this is the deployment we just talked about with the emotionally disturbed person. You look at trigger pull 1 to trigger pull 2, and we're at 0.485 seconds between trigger pull 1 and trigger pull 2. That's, a trained officer who's, confident in the weapon system, and in less than half a second, he's putting 2 probes on target. So
now you had to calculate that manually, didn't you?
I did.
Because all right, note to my engineering team, put the lag on the report.
Lag time. I mean, yeah, just like you've got the distance here. You've got your estimated distance, 24.1 feet. That wouldn't have been possible with legacy devices. But having that distance capability and then the ability to see between cartridge 1, cartridge 2, all the data points are there to not only train in VR, but to take our live deployments and bring these logs back. I know when I'm teaching a TASER class, we're showing our own live deployments. There's a lot of buy-in when the officer sitting in the room with you is being taught by the guy he's seeing on the screen. So we can take these live deployments with these data points and really train up the entire department and build that confidence. When you're talking about, throwing an old legacy TASER device, we run into that in training. Boss, I'm never going to use that device. Okay. Let's talk about building your confidence through, more scenarios or better decision making. So
I'll tell you this, when I talk about, we want to make a TASER more effective, more reliable. We want to outperform your 9mm. People look at me at first like, you're crazy, dude. It's never going to happen. Well, look, and yes, the big problem with TASERs, the thing that's been so frustrating, if you watch the news or social media, people think, oh, the problem with TASERs is they're dangerous. No, the problem with TASERs is they're not reliable enough because of misses and spreads and clothing and all these other issues. So that's where I've been driving my team. Look, we can't make them any more dangerous, but we got to make them more effective. But if you roll back, I recently was doing some research for my book, The End of Killing.
Yeah, show that
available on Amazon.
Yeah.
Firearms have been around for 900 years. The early firearms started in China. It's called a fire stick. They used to blow up sometimes and kill the operator. Early muskets had that problem too. So you can bet the archers of the day were like, good luck. I'm never carrying that thing. That's never going to be as reliable as my bow and arrow. Well, today we fly an aircraft that are far more complex than a 9mm pistol, and they have a lower failure rate, or we wouldn't fly in the darn things. And that part of that's because there's great data, safety data in the aviation industry. And that's why I'm also really proud you guys have joined what we call Trend, which is our TASER research and development, where they're giving us feedback when the things fail. I'll tell you, historically, that's been super frustrating for us, because if an airline has a minor hiccup, all that data is shared with all the engineers immediately. If a TASER has a hiccup in the field or fails for whatever reason, and somebody gets shot and killed or there's some bad output, what happens to that data? The lawyers lock it down. We don't get to see it. That feedback loop didn't exist. So for any of the agencies out there watching, I'd tell you, please participate in our TASER data feedback loop. We got to know what to fix. Once we identify the problems, they're fixable, but it's understanding what's actually happening in the field is the hardest part.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And I'll circle back to, I do really appreciate, I know your time is very sensitive, and to be able to just sit down with you and talk about all this. I mean, you came up with this company yourself, and you're still very passionate to take it to the moon, like you said. So it's been very interesting talking to you. Please share your book where people can find that. I know you're being humble, but
yeah, show it.
Yep, it is available on Amazon. Or if you come to any of our conferences, I'll give you one for free. So if you come to Axon Week, Accelerate, TASERCon, come to one of our CEO summits at headquarters, happy to give you one.
Well, thank you very much, Rick, for your time. This has been really cool. You know, something Mark and I really are passionate about is sharing all of the information that's out there in the law enforcement world on our platform, so that our audience, and just trying to build that up. And we have a core of like younger cops that listen to this, and they need to hear this stuff, so that, like Mark said, they need to be passionate about wanting to use this type of equipment. And then, Scottsdale is out there killing it with all the new technology that you guys are getting invested into. So that's awesome for you guys. But I can't thank you enough for your time. Thank you, Sergeant, for coming on and sharing that story with us. I'll leave it with that.
Yeah. Thank you guys for being here. I think I said what I felt like I wanted to say. So stay safe and be smart.
Hey man, if you're wearing a badge and a gun out there, keep your head down, stay safe. Better days are ahead.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, we'll catch you guys on the next episode. Thank you.